So we're going to engage in a little bit of report out right now, and we've got everybody's kind of got a template, and sorry for kind of squeezing it into a template, but just to kind of structure the effort. Some of it is kind of pragmatics and short-term focused, and some of it is a little bit more longer term, a little bit more, if you will, just slightly over the rainbow, over the horizon, and we want to kind of privilege both of those as we report out. And what we thought we would do is just kind of have a brief report out from each of the groups, first through the short term and the pragmatics, and we kind of get all 5 groups reporting out on that, and then we'd flip it around and get everybody to kind of report out briefly on the longer term, more imaginative, so-called imaginative, or as I say, kind of perhaps just a little bit longer term of time frame. And as we do it, I'll ask each of the folks who are committing to reporting out to simply come on up. You can bring up your flip chart up. Do you guys want it here for purposes? That works for you guys? Okay. So bring it up here. Megan will continue to go ahead and scribe along the way. And then we will invite members of the group, just as we sort of do a flip to the next group, other members of the group that just finished presenting to kind of chime in just to make sure that all of the key points were captured in the report out. And that should probably take us process-wise through this activity. And we are going to engage after that in something approximating a grand synthesis, but that's only if Anne and Jill kind of really... We need coffee. Okay, it's a work to rule situation here. And alcohol works best. Okay. All right. So there will be some attempt to at least reflect, and then we'll open the floor for sure for other people, everyone in the room who'd like to say something around the closing part of the exercise. We are heading to one of Cleveland's wonderful jazz and blues restaurants and bars for the later part of the day, and that's really a really nice watering hole just up the road here for those of you who haven't been to Nighttown before. So with that, why don't we simply begin with the blue group, and we'll let looks like Sarah's about to step up, and I'll let you talk away. And if you don't mind holding this, it's only for purposes making sure that the folks capture that in the mic.
So we didn't use the model. So let's start with that. And so what we did is we actually went around the room and we looked at what our skill set is, what our knowledge base was in the room. And we had quite a bit of experience with cross-disciplinary post-disciplinary, anyhow, whatever, collaboration experience, people who'd set up actual research programs, people who had looked at how to build archives that spoke to galleries, that spoke to humanities research, folks who were absolutely engaged in designing the fast broadband network here for access and working with young people, and people who had private galleries and were working with facilitating entrepreneurial ability and emerging whatever the next generation of people who will be in the cultural and the science world. So, and we of course had a museum and gallery leaders. So having looked at what we kind of knew in the room, we then talked about what our hosts really needed from us, which was to figure out what this place or that place that you're building there could potentially facilitate in this community. And we actually took our knowledge and tried to be very applied. And I think you've got short-term and I think you've got long-term from it. I'll let you call. So we talked about this notion we talked a little bit about Howie Bobby's notion of the third space, an idea that's been picked up by designers like Fisher and others, which is a place where a kind of safe place and an unsafe place that's a conceptual zone that has the ability to actually produce, that allows access and distribution, that is sort of driven by a culture of play as well as sort of serious thought and making. And we looked at how a curatorial program here, which is we learned, and this was very important for us, the 3 key things that potentially were going to happen here. And one of them was to be a place for discourse and ideas. Another, though, was uniquely a commissioning space, which we were all very, very excited about. And the third was, of course, an exhibition space, but also very much a bridge to the community. So we looked at how to build a series of experiences in a physical and virtual zone that would speak to different kinds of audiences and demographies. So we decided that we'd be empiricists, and we do a case study. So we kind of had a lot of fun doing this. And we looked at a collaboration between an artist whose area of interest and had a very strong exhibition. This is a theoretical artist. Exhibition record in artificial life, artwork, a geneticist, a curator who brought them together, a mathematician who was brought in because they realized that they had to figure out a way of accurately visualizing the data as data coming from these sources, and then a 3D computer scientist. And the goal was to come up with the reason that the curator brought these two people together, and this became foundational to our idea of this sort of third space, was because the artist believed that she or he could actually make a new kind of beauty and have a new kind of understanding, and theorized from this actual deep equal collaboration with the scientist. And the scientist believed that he could perhaps learn a new way of understanding his science from the collaboration. So there was a sort of notion of equity that was built in here to this. And so that was their goal. And what we looked at was, in this project, essentially, the artwork wasn't successful. So the artist was frustrated, in a sense, by the outcomes. But what occurred along the path was she actually, at the end, she or he produced a really interesting, important publication that was quite threshold about understanding the nature of aesthetics within the digital space, which was a real contribution to humanities research, and ultimately took that work and did something else with it, but learned a great deal about genetics and is now applying that with a whole other set of collaborations. The scientist had a major breakthrough in his research, and credits the artist for this. And the mathematician and the computer scientist also were able to apply the knowledge. But along the path, there were these key moments where they were able to engage in a level of sketching and dialogue with a whole set of communities in this collaboration that included young people who were interested in the sciences, young people who weren't interested in the sciences but were interested in animation, using this broadband network, structuring a whole set of dialogues across these different communities, and engaging this museum in a very deep relationship with the university across a whole set of different disciplinary areas, which it actually was able to pull in as an effective hub to really get a lot of exciting conversations happening in Cleveland, and then, of course, at the international level. So the idea, there you go. So the idea was that the space would be a catalyst for change and discovery, that the human capacity to facilitate this set of exchanges was both to understand aesthetics, understand the problem of this kind of collaboration, to understand setting it within a museum, to understand the kind of production of knowledge. And the idea was that the audiences would be inspired to see this place as a really fundamental part of this community. Now, we thought if enough of these happened going out into the future, so each of these would have a 2-year sort of horizon of the teams being physically here, going out, that you start one, you move it through, you start another. Some of them will result in incredibly powerful artwork. Some of them will result in incredibly engaged science and successful science. Some of them will fail at both. But it'll create a kind of culture of engagement and physical making here in the space, and virtually that would be a really exciting experiment. So I hope I captured it for our group. Did I do okay?
Great job. Thanks, Sarah. So anyone want to add anything from the Blue Group, would like to add anything to round out the use case of imagining creatively the way in which the space might engender its catalytic convening role in the kind of way that I know it was consistent with Jill's vision of at least how some of the space gets used. Great. Well, we're going to assume then that that is the so-called outside the boundaries conversation, and we're glad that it was the director of the Museum of Contemporary Art who was part of that group, who could help set an example for the rest of the group as to how to follow the template that she created for purposes of the exercise. So all of us will now feel much more liberated and able to think both inside and outside the boundaries. And with that, why don't we take a look and just ask the orange group to come on up. Yellow? Green? Yellow? Okay, yellow it is. Yeah. Are you Julia?
Hello, I'm Julia Christensen, and I was in the yellow group, and I'm gonna try to wrap up kind of what we said. I think that
just in the short term right now, if you will.
You know, I'm going to do it the opposite. I'm going to actually kind of... well, I think I don't know, it's just kind of, in my head, it makes a little bit more sense in terms of synthesizing this. I think that something that we kind of began with was thinking about this sort of larger paradigm shift that we are in the midst of tackling in terms of two things particularly that we thought about. One, how the youth of today learn differently than a lot of us maybe think about them learning. So thinking about how people learn, and then also sort of a shift in how we think of the museum. Not necessarily just as a vessel for objects, but also as a sphere for interaction and collaboration and those sorts of things that I think the Blue Group maybe touched on as well. But I think that we kind of, as a starting point, we're thinking of those issues. We were also thinking of one particular issue that came up in our room is there were a lot of Ohio-based professors and community people. And so we were thinking about how we can create sort of a hub for interaction amongst groups, institutions, rather than just insularly within, if that's a word, within institutions. So, so then we came back to the museum as being sort of a, well, I'm afraid to even say this, but public space that operates outside of any of the academic institutions, and methods of sort of harnessing that space for these other things that we were thinking about. And a couple of great ideas came up about making museum exhibitions more programmatically based, so that during the planning process, prior to the exhibit, community groups in the area, et cetera, were talked to and asked to help design programs that might enhance the experience of the objects, or the pieces themselves within the exhibition. So yeah, I mean, we talked about how a lot of times with an exhibition, the pieces are curated and put together, and then the museum goes out to the community groups to find, sort of programming to go along with the exhibition. And so our idea was the revolutionary idea of doing that sort of prior or at the beginning of the process, so that sort of programs were built in, and experience in that way was built in, not just coming from the museum top down, but also from the ground up of community groups in the region.
Making a real emphasis on those artists participating in the exhibition being connected with the humanists, so not just a community base. But that was the piece I took from what you said several times. So just jumping in.
Great. Yes, definitely. So yeah, creating a collaborative hub, a physical space, a realm of ideas, prior to the events, sharing pedagogical tools, ideas, methodologies, the artist and the humanist, collaboration, thing, da 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 da.
Drop that down there, Reverend.
Sorry. So yeah, I think that, I don't know if I explained the sort of long-term. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, we're looking at this larger paradigm shift and then thinking of the small actions that we are taking currently and can continue to take that add up. You know, I mean, I think that was another thing that I thought about during the presentation was that a lot of institutional change is happening. It's a matter of sort of identifying and addressing the things that are going on and you know, kind of empowering to think about how we are making those choices all the time, and they add up to larger institutional change, which is a paradigm shift that we are all embracing.
Good. Thanks so much. Anything else from the yellow group to add in, please?
We also talked about a more sort of very simple way to do it is to simply do a long-range exhibition schedule, present it to the Humanities Center, and invite them to propose research and courses around it that would coincide.
Oh, lovely, because obviously, as Anne shared this morning, Baker Nord has a commitment to an annual theme, and wherever possible, if you use that long-term calendaring notion, perhaps there'd be other opportunities for intersection, and if not from Baker Nord, then perhaps some of the other academic institutions in the region could make use of those intersecting opportunities. That's terrific. So I think if I got it right, Megan, that we've had two. Oops, sorry. Please.
I think at the base of it is in doing that and in reaching out and sort of finding these intersections, that's actually the way that you can reach out to a broader community. When a museum consults with individuals in the humanities, they again have different communities, so it's sort of like this, like, you know, spider webbing effect of reaching a broader.
So anyone from the group, and was the notion that somehow this hub activity would be something that Baker Nord would catalyze and instigate, or was this something that in fact MOCA was going to be catalyzing, or was it in fact going to be a virtual effort? Collaborative with nobody, no resources and no lead? Is that the notion of how we're going to create this hub? So that's something important to be thinking of, because certainly when in the broader context, for those of you who are not from the region, we have a lot of conversation about regionalism that goes on. You probably do in your communities as well. And the question will be, realistically, kind of the role of choreography or orchestration that goes on. Doesn't mean, quote unquote, ownership in a traditional kind of top-down way, but it certainly does require, and the role that MOCA plays will be important, and maybe it's part of it is essentially, you know, a regular exchanging of notes simply between Baker Nord and MOCA to help facilitate, at least from our part of the region, where those opportunities and arcs of conversation might go. Please, Tom.
You mentioned it kind of builds on that Cleveland Plus idea.
Right.
The notion of the region is more than Cleveland.
Right.
It's that plus and the resources from all those things that make them plus.
Right. And we certainly have the notion of Cleveland Plus. It certainly has lots of physical manifestation in the world at MOCA, because there's been collaborations with Kent State that I know, has informed a lot of design-related activities with students and faculty, and I know there's at least institutionally quite a good, strong relationship to Akron in terms of the new museum and Akron, and probably lots of other things that I don't know anything about, just being a board member kind of guy when it comes to MOCA. So. Okay, so I was just about to say, Megan, that I think we got two groups that kind of broke the rules, and I'm going to try for three and see what I come up with here in terms of short-term and long-term. It was just an idea, short-term, long-term, but oops, there we go, green.
You all will be happy to know we didn't follow the template.
Thanks, Mary.
Not even remotely.
Not even remotely, okay.
Not even remotely, and I'd like to just, well, we tried to make it look like we did, but really, you'll notice that the biggest writing on our chart says retire old folks. That was all, that was all, I want to say that was all just said kind of ironically. We had mostly university faculty, a lot of people from the humanities, and so we actually zeroed in on the second question on the pink sheet about structures, programs, and practices. And you can see here, I guess we did follow this a little bit, talked about incentives. This was the first kind of item of conversation. And one of the things we wanted to talk about was the expectations that are out there for humanities scholars, particularly the expectation that you will be creating publications, and still the resistance to online publications as being a valid method of publication for tenure. One of the things that we thought could work very well for MOCA and Baker Nord would be the kind of creation of some kind of journal or digital publication. The problems with this are everybody knows what they are, but still, if that's going to be one of the validating factors for humanists, it's something that we felt needed to be considered in the short term. We talked about the idea of labs broadly construed that could involve both Baker Nord and MOCA, but also reach out across schools at the university here and out into the community. Also, in terms of incentives, we talked about fellowships. And particularly the creation of additional fellowships that brought MOCA and the Baker Nord Center together. We have a fellowship at CWRU that involves MOCA and our art history department, but nothing specifically at this moment with Baker Nord. We also talked about teaching and some of the issues that came up under that umbrella. We're looking for more interaction between the arts and humanities, particularly looking to creativity in arts practices as a catalyst for humanities activity. Some of the ways that this could take shape would be, for example, to have artists from MOCA become more involved. I mean, it's really simple, but to have artists who are at MOCA become more involved with what we're doing at Baker Nord, even come to give presentations for us, get involved with our students. To have greater links between the Baker Nord Center and exhibitions generally that are going on at MOCA. And then also the notion that we need to begin to engage students long before they hit the university. So to get to the K through 12 population of students, and especially reaching out to the STEM schools in the Cleveland area. Okay, we talked about collaboration and the individualist nature of humanities work, this idea that people, which is now becoming a little bit of an old-fashioned idea, that humanists go off into a study somewhere with their stacks of books and, you know, retreat from the world for 100 years and then come out with a great work. We talked about trying to break that mold a little bit, and particularly to get more involved with engineers and designers on campus, to invite them into the things that we're doing. A very practical idea that came up in the conversation was to connect humanists more directly to the creation of exhibition, kind of the infrastructure of exhibitions. So to have somebody with a critical and analytical eye come in from the humanist side to do some writing about the items or the objects and art on display, even if those were just going to be placards in the exhibition space itself. We all agreed that this would be a really again, a simple but very effective way of making the connection. Going to some of the problems, we talked about budgets, the problem of just the infrastructure of institutions, making funding sometimes challenging, and trying to work to get around that. Somebody mentioned the creation of fellowships that could have maybe a separate budget line that was that linked the institutions from the outset, so that you might be able to get around some of the larger institutional problems. And then issues of governance, things like developing best practices for IP and copyright issues, and balancing those best practices against a desire to take risks and to push ahead. So that was the Green Team's report. Anybody have anything to add?
Please.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. You made the comment about bringing in artists from MOCA, and I just want everybody to realize that there's literally 10 employed artists that work for the university, which are never considered, though all of them pretty much have certainly a beyond a regional reputation. So it's interesting that when we talk about artists, we don't realize that we have artists that are working at the university that have comparable reputations. So to build the synergy, that might be something that you want to build on.
Mary wants to jump back in.
Please go ahead.
I just want to say, Tim, that I didn't mean, and our group didn't mean in any way to leave our artists out, but in looking at the collaboration, we were kind of focused on making the institutional leap over to MOCA. So I think we would all agree that any artists involved at the university would certainly be pulled into whatever initiative comes along.
In fact, our group made the argument, someone in the group, and I don't remember who, contended that we should have digital arts or arts in general as part of a critical part of any humanities curriculum, so that, you know, as a radical notion, right?
I think it was Jared, yeah.
Yeah, just one quick thought on the thematic issue that the Humanities Center has an annual theme, and there's a lack of really good critical literature on digital art and new media art, so that perhaps there might be an exhibition or so at MOCA, and then you bring in people well known in the field to write about that specific exhibition that links the two institutions together a little more closely.
Nice concept. Nice idea. And not only can you write, but could it go back to this issue of incentives in terms of tenure and promotion, which are critical to our humanities scholars, is to think about different ways in which you can both write and then mix and reuse. So read-write kinds of activities. So if in fact you've written a piece, then perhaps we can get you to put it on a podcast. And then that podcast can perhaps not only be used in the exhibition space for people who want to take a deep dive along with the curator's notes, but then also that then becomes stuff that students can use when they begin to interplay with the exhibition space. So get the scholarship right so that the alignment for incentives in the traditional university are contended with, but at the same time try to write once, read in many different ways, and repurpose as many ways as we can. I think that's some version of that. It's 755 in Unix speak. It's called 75. Yeah. World read and write. So that's I think something that we've begun to experiment with. In fact, I think Megan owns sort of, at least at MOCA, that first experimentation with that activity, and now the idea of bringing scholars into that might be a really nice way when and if it makes sense. All right, so not to go too far down the line, but thanks for, and I think we've sort of let Mary and her colleagues sort of speak through both sides of the presentation, and so just to sort of say that seems to be our new methodology. We are shifting and.
3 out of 5.
Not bad. All right, is this the red group with black ink? Great, just thought it was. Just taking a hunch that might be the way it was, and yeah, it's all right. We're all for that. So here you go, Tom.
I'm supposed to go through both.
Just do whatever you want. I mean,
all right. Yeah. All right. So I'll begin. Yeah, we're that's the way. In the words of our new president, that's the way we roll, I guess. Okay. So short-term, tactical, pragmatic ideas. One was focused seminars to bring people together on issues, problems, and I don't know what that means. Specific things. I don't even recognize my own abbreviations. But rather than just having seminars that bring people together to talk about whatever, very focused on problems or issues or concepts that, you know, whatever in the partnership is addressing at a certain time, to just bring in a lot of people who might speak to that. closely related to that is to encourage open discussions. And I think this has been touched on a couple of times. So the idea of salons, just having people come in from wherever, talk about whatever they want to talk about, and just have ideas being generated constantly. Involve influence makers. So closely related to that too, in terms of having open discussions that anybody can come to, was the idea to bring along somebody you know who might be an influence maker, who might have more pull either politically or within a cultural institution or an educational institution, so that they can hear the kinds of conversations that are happening and maybe get energized in themselves to not only continue to come back, but to take those ideas and maybe move them higher up. Another was making conversations last. One of the things that, again, Baker Nord has the idea of themes, but the question was, what happens? Is a semester or a year really long enough to examine a theme, and what happens when that time expires? Does that theme just fizzle, or is it taken? Yeah, is it taken on? And I guess that's a question for you, Anne. Better aggregators of culture. So again, we dealt with two kinds of ideas regarding culture. I'm going to keep stepping on this thing. We dealt with two different ideas of culture. One was culture within an institution, and how do you address that? And then culture more broadly in terms of the social makeup of wherever you're at. In this case, we're referring to culture outside of the organization, I think. Is that correct? So how do you get more people involved from the community? How do you get more ideas, I guess, a diverse expression of those ideas involved in the conversations that you're having? And again, broad engagement strategies. One was you were complimented on the Wi-Fi network, but it was noted there was no landing page. So the idea that when you log on to the wireless network, kind of like when you're in a hotel, it automatically shoots up this one page that you have to look at. And that page itself could direct people to resources around the community or in an area to maybe focus on what's possible, as well as using devices that people already have. So if you are a MOCA and you're located right there at Mayfield and Euclid and people are constantly passing by, is there a way to push content onto whatever devices they're carrying around with them already? And experimental tools, and I'm not sure what that was referring to. Does anybody from my group have any?
The fact that you wanted not just new ideas but new tools for them. So the idea that particularly interpretation in museums, we talked about the idea that maybe there's a way that the public are writing the labels and it's more than one person, and how do you share that? So what are the new tools we need for all these new ideas?
Thank you. All right, so continuing my linear approach, I'm going to go back now to long-term. New styles of leadership or open leadership. So again, one of the ideas that kept coming up was the notion of, again, this goes back to the idea of the institutional culture. So there's a hierarchical institution, patriarchal approach. How do you break that open? How do you generate ideas from the bottom up? How do you encourage lab environments? How do you encourage more openness in leadership styles? Spaces in and of themselves. So again, lab environments, but more specifically, you encourage formal spaces, encourage ad hoc spaces, so kind of like the salons or things that just kind of spring up, and then virtual spaces, so online communities, things like that. Again, break down hierarchies. I think that kind of touches on what I went over first. Again, going back to the themes with Baker Nord, perseverance of discourse. I know that was. Can you speak a little bit more to that, Lynn?
It goes really back to making the conversations last, having vehicles for ongoing discussion, and even if they take on their own paths.
Partnership between Baker Nord and MOCA, for instance, can act as a catalyst to advance thought. So not only on an individual level, but collaborative and on an organizational level. So how can partnerships like that be catalysts for both individual, community, and broader thought, to advance thought? Encourage a culture of experimentation, and I think that was touched on right off the bat. So funding sources that allow for failure. It was noted that in science, this is something that is encouraged or accepted. So if you get money and you do experiments and they fail or they don't work, that's kind of par for the course. But for some reason in arts organizations, it's not as viewed as acceptable. So encourage that kind of experimentation that can fail. Not that you want to fail, but it happens. Record and archive. So all this experimentation, all this collaboration generates stuff. What happens to the stuff? And also, if there are end products, what happens to them? So encourage a culture that keeps records of what it did and makes those available as well. And foster a community of interests. So again, try to look to themes or interests of people or groups in a community and bring people together on those interests rather than the idea of, again, the silo or the discipline. Encourage interest, that way you can bring people from everywhere into the discussion, not just along kind of an academic discipline or theme. And that's it.
Can I add one?
Yes.
Go ahead. Of course, just give it time. Let me add one thing which was sort of there, which we did discuss, which was whether the center, as a fosterer of ideas and community discussions, is willing to consider it a success if simply in the act of fostering discussions, groups forms, individuals go on in their own routes to create change. So it's being a catalyst for change, even if the center isn't the actual cause of change, considered a success. And I think that will really influence sort of the model. That goes to what we were saying there about community of interest. You might aggregate a community of interest, even though it's not part of the formal program that year, if it exists, and just build these cauldrons, see what comes out.
We're going to go to Margot, who's orange throughout.
Last but not least, the Orange Brigade. We were all curators. The discussion centered on bridging the gap between the university, the museum case, MOCA, centering on essentials such as determining and analyzing resources. There was a discussion of creating a topology, a map, and really identifying resources that CASE has and resources that MOCA has so that you could really define concretely what the joint intersections were, and of course to establish common goals and a common vision. Practical elements that we came up with as a tactical steps, access, for example, on the part of MOCA to CASE's database, in terms of the internet and their libraries and access to all the knowledge base that they have there. Another thing that came up in a very simple thing that could be an area where MOCA and CASE could collaborate would be in housing. They've got dorms. We have artists who want to come stay with us to create new work. One area of discussion involved interpretation in the museum and how, rather than continuing to always only elaborate in labels or gallery guides or catalogs, to make more use of people's mobile devices and engage the viewer with their own mobile device in searching the internet, in discovering on their own interpretation of the works of art in front of them. In terms of the longer range, the first and most important item, just joint commissioning projects. I mean, huge projects with artists. They take resources that, if shared, we could extend and make possible. Another discussion was to develop cross-platform approaches to creativity, and this is just drawing from multiple departments, from multiple disciplines. Both of us are knowledge-based, not industries, knowledge-based institutions, so we have a commonality there. The last thing was to develop a multi-platform dialogue on the internet where all the institutions could have a live dialogue in virtual space to enrich the experience of the art museum and share that collaboratively, have all the different disciplines feeding into a same dialogue. Anyone else to add to that from our group?
Well, in terms of the multi-platform dialogue, also involving a broader audience, involving the community as well as MOCA and the Baker Norton Center and professors, so that there becomes a kind of synergy where different, it's not an authoritarian voice from either of the sources, but in fact something evolves out of it or synthesizes out of the communication between the different sectors.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thanks to everybody for pulling all that together. I'm very, very appreciative. Thanks. We're going to kind of keep on rolling, kind of right into the effort at grand synthesis. And I whispered to Megan, so who's in charge of the grand synthesis? And she turned to me and said, you are. In as much as I'm actually going to ask Anne to help me with at least one tool for thinking about grand synthesis. And it was actually one of the slides that I'd never seen before that Anne shared earlier in the day. And I've just asked her to sort of schematically offer it to us. And I'm going to give you my own sort of really just high-level sort of sense that the contested terrain and the terrain over which we have huge opportunities in exploring the relationship between Baker Nord and MOCA, and over time between hopefully making that very porous over time so that other academic institutions and other museums, collecting or non-collecting, will find a way to move into this orbit, might think about it not only in terms of the formal education work that institutions like ours are involved in, but the informal work that perhaps we should be doing, and certainly others have mission to do along the way, and certainly realizing that learning is, several people mentioned this whole notion of lifelong learning as an arc of reflection for institutions to reimagine what they can be doing along that line, but if nothing else, just temporally along the idea of a person's day. Several people mentioned that, of course, learning is going on, all the time, but not necessarily in the formal ways that many of us were schooled in terms of thinking about when learning takes place. Young people are certainly engaged significantly in authoring and publishing their own work. Much of it could stand not only the edit function, but also reflection and context along the way. That goes on not only in the libraries and museums, but a lot of it at home, and trying to find out a way to kind of create an ecology of learning that sort of permeates into the home and then out of the home into the broader environment along the way. And as several folks in the room from here know, I'm really myself very excited about a potential additional place of orbit, which happens to be the library community. And so I was particularly keen when Anne sort of shared her own work in this area, because among other things, to go to Anne's presentation about where interesting resources are have come and hopefully will continue to flow, the IMLS world in terms of institutional grants that join museums and libraries speaks not only to the opportunity to create and support informal learning activities, but I think also invites then from public libraries to university libraries, from university libraries to researchers to bring and span the gap between informal and formal kinds of learning activity. I was also intrigued, and I think it's important certainly to pick up on a piece that Sarah raised earlier about the notion of what kinds of institutions are important in many different kind of cross-cultural settings, that they're in fact both the informal and formal learning that we expect in the institutions that we know. One of the most important institutions that plays an enormous role in other parts of the world are the religious institutions. They form not only formal learning, but there are all kinds of societies that are associated with churches and other religious associations that are there for welfare. They are there for transmission of cultural practices. All of which, it just strikes me that when I saw sort of Anne's schema, gave me something to try to begin to piece together not only what I heard today from lots of different kinds of inputs, but potentially somewhere in the nexus of those many waves and arcs that are represented up on the whiteboard, perhaps some areas of opportunity for the MOCA Baker Nord environment. With that kind of really off-the-cuff effort to simply, in many ways, simply appropriate Anne's schema to try to provide an on-one-leg synthesis of what I heard today, I want to actually ask each of you, if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to pass the mic around one more time. At the beginning of the day, we started with headlines from last night. I wouldn't mind if you could try to give us a headline from today, your takeaway. What was if you had one takeaway that you didn't necessarily walk in here knowing that you were going to actually, for sure, experience? They're all full, so we're going to use this. We're going to use this, if you don't mind, because it'll, when we take our digital picture, and if Anne's all right with it, we'll use her schema sort of in the middle of it. As perhaps some way of capturing some of the experience today. So I've used many more than my a headline, and that's all done on one leg. Why don't we start at the top of the room and work instead of at the bottom, just to keep you on your toes, and invite you to kind of give us the one. If you had an aha, what was it? And if it wasn't an aha, what was the takeaway headline? And we'll do our best to try to capture some of that. Mary, do you want to start?
Well, just off the top of my head, I think the awareness of MOCA and Baker Nord's interest, especially in this lab concept, I think that just is really exciting just to think about the possibilities, and I would only encourage a great deal of openness in this and really thinking about all the possibilities of it.
That's great. So yeah. The lab as a kind of space for experimentation and failure, which was really the idea. Yep.
I'm in the museum seminar group that Anne's convened, and I'm struck by the fact that a museum without a collection is actually an exceptionally powerful entity which flies in the face of every bit of conventional wisdom.
That's great, Mark. Thanks. Holly, I'm going to come to you next, if you don't mind.
I'm just sitting here looking at the word telepistemology, and I've been thinking about the distance between knowledge and the relationship between distance and knowledge ever since it was introduced this morning.
Thanks, Ken, for sharing that with us. That first had me kind of going, like, is it a word? I checked online, but that's also got us scratching our head. Please, Howard?
I pass.
Howard. Those of us who know you or know of your reputation would not accept, even in the state of Ohio, which has a long time experience, when Ohio passes in the 1968 Democratic Convention. Come on, you could do better than that. One takeaway.
Takeaway, I want to take away a photo of this board,
Great.
actually. I've actually taken a few photos as it's been amassing.
Great.
I would like to see a kind of hyperlinks project on top of this board.
Lovely.
With all of the connections between all of the interesting points, because I think they all are they form a very interesting web, and almost virtually everything up there is connected to at least a couple of other things up there.
Right,
So.
and that was a point actually made earlier in the day, that there's huge research opportunities embedded in many of these kind of core concepts that are out there. Chris? And just pass it along down the line.
The title that I sort of thought of was a three-word title: interconnectivity, innovation, and inspiration. That was it.
Well, that's very
Those are all I words?
They are.
Oh.
They are. Alliteration. I think I have two pairings that that keep sort of coming up, and one would be space and how space relates to ideas, and the second, sort of this organic relationship between technology, what we think of as artificial, and the handmade. So those two sort of pairings.
Okay, keeping with my matter theme, I think that especially from my the individual group, the breakout group, I think that I've come to the realization from today that the humanities matter in a different way than I knew before. I always knew that the humanities matter, but I now see the interconnection between, or the strong possibility, maybe it's not there yet, of interconnection between the humanities and technology.
I guess what I think is just, I'm impressed with how kind of timely and essential this conversation is, and how much the culture has to change at our institutions for this to continue and be successful.
Wearing my very practical Baker Nord Associate Director hat, I'm zeroing in on Ann Murphy's comment that there is stimulus package money for the humanities.
In Boston, Cambridge, Greater Boston, there are two kinds of art institutions. There are independent art institutions, including, well, the one non-collecting Kunstverein, which we used to have. ICA started a collection, but and there are academically aligned art institutions, the List, the Rose Art Museum at Brandeis, things like that. It's, to my mind, always been that the academically aligned institutions are the most adventurous and the most fun. And I'm so impressed that an independent Kunstverein like MOCA is reaching out to make an academic connection without losing their independence for exactly this same adventurous purpose when you don't have to.
I think I was most inspired today by Ken's definition or redefinition of media in a much broader sense as lenses or interpretive methodologies. And I thought that was very rich for possibilities.
So as a headline, next question, libraries.
Wonderful.
Carl? I come away thinking there really needs to be a journal or something, some way to capture this, and also then thinking about Steve's statement this morning that maybe one of the reasons we keep having these discussions is because we're not putting the discussions down enough on paper or ways that allow us to continue them forward, because this is amazing. Yeah, I said paper. Paper.
What's that? Terrific.
What a very interesting room full of people. Thanks to the organizers for putting this together, and I look forward to casual conversation this evening.
Great. Sarah, just your thoughts and pass the...
I wanted to mention a resource that actually needs to be there in your community. I was totally impressed with onecommunity.org, your broadband network here, and I think you've just got this, I'm going to not speak in general, you've got this pragmatic opportunity to shape something around that resource which binds together a lot of these environments. And I guess my word would be, it's all about the human factors to make this kind of process successful. The human factors, the human processes.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Transparency and museum as social space.
Okay, and I just wanted to say I'm really privileged to hear this discussion as an artist and a teacher in high school. And as Hawkins School, we're going to be down here in University Circle. Our students are self-starters. They're going to want to be part of this conversation, so get ready.
Thanks. I brought this book, and I didn't get to do anything with it, but it's called At the Edge of Art, and the authors are Jolene Blaze and John Ippolito, and it was in response to your show that you curated at Cleveland State. It made me want to learn more. So this opened my eyes, and as well as today, I feel like I'm on track.
Did you get that? Sorry. Yeah. One of the things that I've tended to notice is that there's a tendency to fetishize things. So in art, there's a tendency to fetishize objects. I think there's also a tendency to do that with institutions and thought models or structures or approaches to thinking. And in psychological terms, fetish is not a good thing. It's unhealthy because it doesn't allow you to move forward. So I think that I'm kind of saying that this has made me think of not of kind of an anti-fetish approach to thinking about things.
I appreciate the potential that we see here in the partnership.
I keep thinking about that every time we say digital, we don't mean digital, we mean really anything other. We've got this traditional thing, we mean other, we don't mean digital.
Thanks, Martha.
I think of community reflection, that these institutions should help the community reflect and be a reflection of the community.
Nice, nice. Slow down.
Did they say your names again?
Just give her an extra 30 seconds. A community reflector.
Well, this is a pretty new experience for me. As an artist, I just amazed how MOCA as a museum really opened up with humanity. So I think it just changed a new way of thinking the future as an artist, how to be involved with the society.
I think that two things that technology and science have to teach both the humanities and the arts and art museums is to take the chance to fail, and that failure is acceptable. And also, I loved what Anne said about learning by tinkering. Even if it's a digital or an idea, you still need to do something in terms of working or creating, that there needs to be a physical aspect to it.
Yeah. What today made me think of was the political economy of cultural convergence.
Gary, give her a chance to catch up for a minute. I think we've been characterizing a new humanism here.
Political economy.
Political economy. Okay. All right. Slight pause.
The other's about grant writing.
Okay. Throughout the day, I think we've been characterizing a new humanism. So my headline would be now, the new humanism, it's here, but what is it?
Thanks, Carolyn?
What I take away is just from a perspective of what I can take back to my educational institution, to my school, which is the idea of the paradisciplinary, taking over that interdisciplinary, the terminology stuck with me there. That language is important, and the design of spaces, not just physical, but the intellectual understanding of how that design needs to converge in order to be more productive.
I forgot to mention this morning, but I've been very impressed that Ohio is a swing state. And I want to thank you for voting Democrat. What I found out today was that Ohio is kind of a swinging state too. But the one thing I wanted to say is that because the other thing that Cleveland is so famous for is all of its medical facilities, the Cleveland Clinic, et cetera. So the last thing I'll say is curators cure too.
So do hams.
My takeaway is that I'm not exactly surprised at the conversation over the course of the day. Change is really hard. It's really difficult to manifest, and I think you really need to be complimented on what you're trying to do, first and foremost. I don't have any answers in terms of what it ought to be. but I think what you're trying to establish a methodology for moving forward and not really just try to get to the solutions immediately. That's really a wonderful thing to see. And I guess the takeaway for me is that just continue to think about what these kinds of cooperative models might actually shape up to look like, and not just fall to the obvious. There are a lot of possibilities.
Every once in a while, I'm reminded of a very old Art Buchwald column about an election a few elections ago, where he interviewed the person who he felt was really pivotal in the election, a guy named Mo. His last name was Mentum. And he found that momentum was the key to success. So I guess I want to say that I hope momentum stays on the project team.
How to follow that? I guess the thing that occurred to me in our session was just an image of the new MOCA as being this kind of, the words I've used earlier, like permeable and lab, but this theater or lab or exchange mechanism between, the more exciting academic developments, kind of current affairs, and, for want of a better word, the public or the community. So something like designing culture, multimodal lab/theater, I don't know, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity for MOCA to be this kind of space that I'm not aware of existing anywhere, that is a kind of public face for the university, but doesn't present, but engages and really involves the community in a real two-way thing. So.
So I think what I took away is this notion of co-opetition, and it's already been published as a term, but so it's the idea that we have to cooperate in order to compete. And I think that's one of the big things that from a regional perspective as well as an institutional perspective, we kind of have to embrace that. I think the other thing that I find wonderful about all of the dialogues that are going forward now is this notion that we're not willing to settle for expediency. Like, we will take the time, we will understand that it's a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year process. So.
I know you all gathered us here today to sort of help you work through ideas, but coming from a university-based, multidisciplinary, non-collecting contemporary art institute that touts its laboratory, it's been super, super helpful for me, and I've actually taken lots away from it, and it's been great to have these conversations. And so my headline would be super empowering.
Well, I guess my headline would really be that we represent a lot of different institutions, but we're all facing similar problems. And then just in a purely selfish way, I was incredibly impressed on how I attend a lot of conferences and run a lot of conferences, and what really impressed me here was that everyone was allowed to express their own opinion in a really positive way, and it was very professionally and smoothly run, and I'm going to take that back to my next conference.
Myself as well. I've learned a lot today, and I'm very thankful to have been able to participate to this, and I came up with a very long headline? What is it? And because Yes, I'm Italian. I can speak forever, and which sort of brings together the three wonderful speakers that we have, and it goes like this: did you know that we are all engaged in media, and that museums are narrative machines, and that where digital humanities come even more alive to people?
Say that again slowly.
Yes. You can. I'll go and write it.
I got the first part. I started writing in text message. You know that. We're all engaged in it, yeah. We'll just leave a big circle for the rest.
Please, Greg.
Okay. One of the things I'm taking away is the word paradisciplinary, which I like very much. And
So that's, for me, a very good word. I've been at, as all of us have, I've been at a lot of conferences and discussions and faculty meetings and things like that where people are talking about collaboration and interdisciplinary and blah, 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 blah. And in most cases, in my experience, the sort of top-down institutional support and structure is not there, and it doesn't happen, or it's very difficult, very, very difficult to do. And so I'm really, really pleased at the sort of combination of pragmatism and vision that's in this conference, and I hope that Mo comes and stays as well. Yeah.
Great.
Let's see. I was happy to learn about the National Center for Research in Advanced Information and Digital Technologies. That just rolls off the tongue. I'm gonna, hey, you can see, I'll talk about it whenever I can try to. And I think that's gonna be a real opportunity for us to think about these collaborations as fomenting creative projects to send, because I mean, it's right there. So as soon as the appropriation comes in, we'll be ready to flood it. And then the other thing that I really appreciate, because I hadn't really looked at art museums and galleries, as I had focused more on science technology museums. So this was really interesting education for me about hearing what the concerns are and what the key issues are. So I appreciate that.
Well, I think the headline of this conference is "It's happening in Cleveland." I don't know what else you say, but I'll give myself a plug too. Jack Boehner is going to control these appropriations. You come from Ohio. If each of you took the time to send him a note, it would be very helpful.
John, heading out, Republican. John Boehner? Yeah. Right. But he owns the current fiscal year, so that's your point, right, Ann? Yes. Right. And all of the...
Ralph Regula was a long-time Republican and did more for this area than give credit to. I just want to... These people may not be our favorite folks, but they are part and parcel.
No, critically important, and Boehner...
Well, as I said this morning, it was Ralph Regula gave us money for the study.
Absolutely.
It's often people in the minority who want to look better. Richard Nixon started the Arts and Humanities Endowments, right? Because he was so insecure. He wanted, Len Garment said, this is where you can look good to those people that don't like you. So,
Vanity seems to matter. All right.
What I take away, well, I'm hungry, and even more hungry for that third space that Sarah Diamond talked about. Bring it on.
Okay, just before we give the microphone to our co-host, I hope that you'll join me in thanking Megan for just a super. Those of us who have the privilege of working with her in one way, shape, or form at MOCA knows that she, along with her colleagues, and in particular, Margot got several shout-outs yesterday, but really do an amazing job in actually making it possible for us to carry on there. I also want to thank, as on behalf of at least myself, the Baker North community, in particular Margie, for all of her work in helping get us all of this together. So thank you so much for all of your work. We very much appreciate it. Thanks, Maggie, very much. And I'm sure there are lots of other people to thank, but if there are, I'm going to let...
How about you, Len?
Oh, well.
Yeah.